Salutations, listeners.
Valamulis.
No.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Three Men and a Basement, and we are the Ultra Crepidarians. My name is Colin McLeod.
Mark Hoff here.
Action Jackson.
Xmas Jackson. Flaxon Waxon.
The Saxon, I think we established.
Yeah.
I thought he was Taxon.
I am taxing sometimes. I'm paying all kinds of taxes.
In this podcast, we review movies, and we deliver to you, the listener, an average schmuck's opinion about hidden gems in the wide world of cinema. In the show, we try and target movies that are not total blockbuster smashes. We also aim for ones that are not so obscure that you couldn't get your hands on a copy even if you wanted to. Instead, we like to aim for that sweet spot right in the middle. Movies that maybe you've heard of and never seen, maybe you've seen but it's been a while, and you need a little bit of encouragement to know whether or not these are worth digging out of the closet, dusting off, throwing on the phonograph, and dancing around a jaunty tune with.
With the wolves.
With the wolves.
So, like, you're saying if you found this under a basket, you should put it in a DVD player?
Yeah.
That's what we're saying? The basket?
The basket? Or do we... What basket are we talking about?
The basket in Grandpa's attic.
Oh, the basket case.
Which grandpa?
Grandpa Jack, I think.
Got it.
Yeah.
Ooh. Hey, we review these movies, and we deliver to you our take on whether or not we think they are worth watching. And this week, we reviewed the movie...
The Express.
The Express.
The Express.
That was very, like, hocus pocus of us, I thought. Like, just like this. We fucking nailed that. I hope that got picked up as well as I thought. So The Express has nothing to do with hocus pocus.
Or pineapples.
Or pineapples.
Yeah.
This was my first time seeing this movie since it was in theaters. And I think I only saw it in theaters because I worked at a theater at the time. And I caught a bit of it and I was like, oh boy. And, oh boy! I don't know why I said it like that. Like it was fucking howdy doody time.
That's creepily close to little Mickey then.
It was really close. Oh, God.
I need to leave.
No, stay here with us, Mark.
That's gonna make me leave more.
Be one of us, Mark.
Stop! Wait, stop touching me. Bro, you cut that out too. Okay, so The Express, 2008 film, rated PG. PG?
Yeah, definitely.
I'd say PG.
Yeah, it was surprising because it deals with like heavier elements, more socially relevant topics, but it stayed wholesome.
By the numbers, it was PG. I mean, there was no swearing or sexual content.
I mean, yes, there was nothing that would classically perhaps be considered a swear word, but like the N-bomb is dropped several times. Like,
yeah, that's true.
I don't know if I would strictly go with a no, this is no swearing, like heavy language, warning.
Right. But I have heard the argument made somewhat recently that the word was used contextually, so in some respects, it is of its time. That doesn't mean that it is acceptable now, but
Nor was it acceptable then.
No, but it places it within the context of the movie, and I think without it, wouldn't fully appreciate the gravity of emotions that were present.
And to be fair, it's not a movie that was made a long time ago that had this language in it, and then we're examining the movie as a product of its time. Mark is saying that
it takes place within a time period.
Yes, exactly.
Where that word was more prevalent.
And the content of the movie is such that, like you said, the use of that word actually, like, to omit it would almost be like to do an injustice to the people who actually, like, you went through it and suffered as a result of it.
A little side note, I was actually kind of surprised we didn't hear more utterances of it, given the framework of when this movie was depicted. But again, being made in 2008, I feel like it was enough of a hot button that they tried to both convey the emotion that goes with that word without overusing it.
Yeah, I think also, too, they wanted that PG rating.
Yeah.
And I agree with them. I mean, I would have gone for that PG rating, too, if I was making the movie. Not only do you open yourself up to a wider audience, but much more importantly, your audience expands to impressionable minds and helps them understand what actually was the plight of certain people at a certain time and what is the plight of certain people today, and helps sort of like contextualize the world in many respects. It's a teaching tool. But I think we're sort of dancing around the issue. We should probably get to the what is this movie about, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of circling. So 2008 movie, PG, 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Felt right.
Yeah, felt right. The IMDb description has this movie as a drama based on the life of college football hero Ernie Davis, the first African American to win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, nuts and bolts for sure. Actually,
IMDb lists this as a biography drama sport.
Yep.
Yeah.
That felt on the nose for me.
I wouldn't put anything else in there.
No, there's really nothing else that fits.
But the description, I would say, is almost verbatim what I tell people when I tell them to go watch this movie.
Yeah. It gives nothing away, and I mean, it is a biography. It's
it's a true story. I feel like true stories almost get that, like, they almost get an extra pass of, like, I'm a hardcore no spoiler kind of guy, but I feel like true stories are the ones that you can just sort of dip over the line in spoiler territory because you're like, oh, but it's a true story. Like, you could know that. You could just know that he was the first Black Heisman Trophy winner, or you could know that, like, the Titanic sinks, or whatever. It's like, I might not be telling you anything you don't already...
Yeah, it's about the journey.
For example,
exactly.
I mean, I have not seen this movie, but I did know the story that it was based off of. I knew who the main character was. I knew the story, but it's still a movie about the journey.
Yeah. You gotta set it up and show how somebody's life went. Okay, so directed by
Gary Flater.
Gary Flater, classic Gary. Am I right?
Yeah.
Big
Come on,
fan.
Gary.
Felt
I actually am a fairly big fan of this guy's films. He's not a small director in any sense. I mean, he's done some off-the-wall stuff, but Zoo was one of my favorites. He also directed the 2012 through 2016 show Beauty and the Beast, which was sort of a modern retelling of the story. Life Unexpected, as well as Life on Mars. So...
Lots of life. This guy's really into life.
Yeah, he
probably only eats life cereal.
I think that's correct. Yeah. With brown sugar, though.
He's not allowed on any boat transit because he steals the lifeboats.
Yep. He is the life of the party.
He is, and he does have a favorite board game.
Yep.
And,
Monopoly.
Yep, Monopoly. You've got it. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. But please direct a very fine film.
Yes.
Who do we have in this movie?
Okay, so our main character, a man named Rob Brown, I was not familiar with his other work.
He plays Ernie Davis. He plays the main character.
Yeah.
He was in pretty much all of the Batman movies directed by Christopher Nolan.
Finding Forrester. Big time. And Coach Carter.
Coach Carter was a huge one for him.
Mm-hmm. We also have in this movie Dennis Quaid.
I
don't know anything about Dennis Quaid personally, but I can say he is one of my favorite actors. And I know he I feel like in many respects he's got that infectious smile, and I know that's his thing, but it totally still works.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't smile a lot in this film because he plays the coach, very gruff and rough. Yeah, definitely a great actor.
Hey, Ross, is this Clancy Brown?
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with most of his
work, dude, the Kurgan!
The Kurgan?
Yeah.
The Kurgan wasn't?
The Kurgan from the Highlander, dude.
Oh, yeah. See, so what I know him best from was actually this weird TV show, or I think it was on HBO, but it was called Carnival.
Oh yeah.
You guys ever watch that?
Yep. But dude, he was also in Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
He played Zeb.
Oh, he was in Cowboys vs. Aliens.
Yep.
He was also he was also in the Shawshank Redemption. He plays the lunatic head of the guards.
Yeah.
I feel like he's the kind of guy who you instantly recognize he can play a pivotal role in a movie, but he's never a headliner.
So Clancy Brown is actually one of the world's most prolific voice actors. He's actually more successful and famous than Mark Hamill in the voice acting world.
Excuse me, sir. Nobody is as successful or famous as Mark Hamill in any world. Even in a galaxy far, far away.
I'm just saying.
I heard recently that he was the most prolific voice actor. Very recently.
How recently?
About 30 seconds.
Okay, that's all right. To be fair, that is more up to date than my information.
For those of you that don't know, Clancy Brown is also the voice actor that plays Mr. Krabs on SpongeBob.
Sorry, Joker, but
Yeah,
Krabs.
I guess Mr. Crab wins. Thanks, capitalism.
Macalism.
Capitalism.
Who else we got?
Okay, we've got Omar Benson Miller.
He's kind of a big deal.
He is a big deal. He was in 8 Mile. You'll definitely know him from 8 Mile if you've seen it. He plays Soul George. We've got Charles D. Sutton in this movie. Charles D. Sutton, you will definitely know his face. He was kind of in some stuff as like not smaller parts, but he was in like Gothica and Alien 3, but what I actually know him from is A Time to Kill. He plays the sheriff. If you've ever seen A Time to Kill, you would definitely know him as the sheriff.
You know, I'm going to say something that's probably never been said out loud. I recognize him from Alien 3.
That's interesting. I recognize him from Longmire.
Ah, he does have a very memorable face.
He does. Well, and he's one of those actors that you've probably seen before. You just couldn't pin him down.
Oh, you definitely know his face. Okay, couple more rapid fire before we move on. People you know their face. Chelsea Ross. He looks a lot like Billy Bob Thornton. He was in Major League and Basic Instinct, but I know him as the bad guy's henchman in Richie Rich. Saul Rubinek.
Yeah.
You know his face for sure. He was in a lot of stuff, but again, I know him from a little-known movie that's also on our list to review, Undercover Blues.
Oh, yeah.
Also with Dennis Quaid, and he and Dennis Quaid, I kind of wonder, anytime I see two actors like reappear, together in another movie, it always makes me think maybe they're friends.
Saul Rubinek is everywhere. Law and Order, Person of Interest, Warehouse 13, Beauty and the Beast, The Good Wife,
The Bad Wife,
Angie Tribeca,
Warehouse
Blue
14,
Bloods,
Red Bloods,
Grey's Anatomy, Black Anatomy, Schitt's Creek. Yeah, he's all over the place. So he's one of those people that you will definitely recognize.
And the last one is Jeff Stultz, who I know as the douchey ex-boyfriend in She's Out of My League. Like a conventionally handsome guy, but also like looks a bit like a tool. No offense, I'm sure he's a lovely guy in real life.
Straight up, like you look at this guy and the first thing that comes to mind is meathead.
Yeah, he's got that like kind of chiseled jaw, and like the perfect features, and you're like, ew, you drive a Porsche and just don't stop talking about it.
He looks like the star quarterback that drives a very expensive vehicle and orders scotch at a party.
Okay.
That's an unfortunate description.
Depending on the party, I also drink scotch at a party.
I drink scotch at home on my couch.
I drink scotch at home on your couch.
That's true.
Fuck, we're way far afield.
Yeah. Okay, we talked about who directed it. We talked about the stars. I mean, do we feel like we can move on to recommendations?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
I think we're Lord Dern with this first part.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I'm gonna kick it off and say yes, I recommend it. No caveats needed.
Whoa, that's a first remark.
Yeah, this is a solid movie. Now it is like full on drama, so you got to be just ready for a drama. But yeah, no, solid movie.
I would definitely recommend it. No caveats. However, I would say trigger warnings for those that are sensitive to language that we described earlier in the episode.
Yeah.
I would say still watch it, but be prepared.
Yeah. That's a big wreck for me. This movie is in my opinion, an awesome sleeper. I feel about this movie that it's like, if you liked Remember the Titans, this movie is, I think, just as good, maybe even better. To be perfectly honest, I
would say it's better.
They're both very good movies, but I really enjoy this movie. And if somebody ever tells me that they like Remember the Titans, I'm like, oh, have you seen The Express? Because it's such a sleeper. Remember the Titans is a huge movie.
Well, and think about the genre in which this movie appears. I mean, you've got Coach Carter, you've got Blindside, you've got Remember the Titans, The Express. There's about 5 or 6 specific football movies featuring a black running back or quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, a good movie to watch with like your family. Like if you've got kids, watch it with them and then have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's a slice of time, and I think it's important that the things that this movie was calling to light, that you discuss them, with your kids, with the younger generation.
Well, and
a lot can be
a lot of positive conversation can be pulled in.
And pulling from that, what I had just described, the list of movies featuring black football players. Think about the timepieces that those movies represent. Each one of them happens in a different decade, and each decade is later than the last, or moving forward. The Blind Side is a modern movie about a black football player who still undergoes the same struggles that Ernest Davis does in The Express. So if you think about that, that's 50, 60 years apart, and they're still undergoing the same struggles.
I mean, plenty of struggles. He probably wasn't having the bottles thrown at him, but I'm right there with you. Yeah. But no, I think the only caveat I would give to this movie is strong racial language. So if you're sensitive to that, it's not Django Unchained. It's not every 30 seconds, but it is, it's there. And then also, if you're just not a sports fan, I think you can get a lot out of this movie even if you don't like sports. But there are some people who will avoid a sports movie like The Plague, and I think those people might struggle with this movie if they can't appreciate the other sort of social commentary aspect of it.
I will say football is my least favorite sport of all sports. And I really enjoyed
even more than competitive nipple pinching.
Yes, that shit is exciting, especially when you participate.
Oh, participating is my least favorite part.
Oh, that's my favorite part.
Good God,
Mark. And we're talking American football here.
Yeah,
we're not talking about the soccer.
I would rather watch soccer.
Are there any soccer movies out there that really bubble up?
Bend It Like Beckham.
Shaolin Soccer?
The Big Green.
Shaolin Soccer, Big Green.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, Green Street Hooligans.
Yeah, we got some. Don't you shit on our soccer.
Very well.
Green Street Hooligans, Elijah Wood and Charlie Hunnam.
So we all recommended it.
Yeah.
Rex all around.
Are we ready to What? Okay. Wait. All right. I'm gonna hang on. Pause. I'm gonna give Mark another crack at that. Oh God, he did the same thing. No. Skookwalla? Bwah. Thank you, Jackson.
Yeah.
You are a gentleman and a scholar.
Yeah.
Mark, get your shit together.
Don't pretend like we got rules, Colin.
I'll say it again.
Bwah.
We're in spoilers.
Squalla.
We're in spoilers.
How's this movie start?
It starts with the beginning.
Oh, yeah. So
which is a pretty good place to start, I think.
I typically like to start things there.
I'll start when I was a child.
I was born at a very young age.
Okay, so the first memorable scene at least is we've got two kids walking down some train tracks. They're picking up bottles. Presumably they're going to take them and get some change for them. But they're just kind of walking down the rail track, having a good conversation, whatever. And then we see another group of kids kind of walking in the opposite direction, also picking up bottles. One group of kids white, one group of kids is black. There is a tense
bit of a turf war.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I would go turf war. The white kids kind of ambushed the black kids.
Well, yeah, there's a lot more of them, and they're coming out of the bushes.
Yeah, they definitely knew they were coming and set them up and surrounded them and were ready to
throw down,
beat the shit out of them. It's not even a throwdown. It's not even a fight. It would have been a slaughter. I mean, it was 15 kids on 2.
Yeah.
With bats.
They literally just wanted to beat up some kids, some black kids to be to put a point on it, and it was actually it was really a well done scene because you feel it's gross to just watch it, and these kids are basically give us your bottles and maybe we'll let you go.
And this scene takes place in 1940.
1949.
1949. Okay.
Yeah. The train kind of rolls by. One of the kids kind of jumps on that train, books it out of there. The other kid with the bottles is kind of stuck there, now surrounded by some 15 odd kids who are kind of closing in around him. And this guy just wraps the bottles up, in his kind of wraps his bag up, and then just takes off running, and in almost like a Forrest Gump-esque way.
It was awesome.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
It was impressive.
The coolest part to me was the fact that he had the bottles. He didn't jump on the train with his friend because in order to do that, he would have had to let the bottles go, like his friend did. So he not only was running with his bottles, he was running with a bag of his friend's bottles, and he just fucking takes off, and like 15 kids are fucking chasing him, and he just outruns them all. Like, through backwoods.
I've seen Olympic hurdlers with less impressive displays. Like, this was amazing.
So fast forward about 10 years, he's playing high school football. He is really kicking ass. He is dubbed the Elmira Express, and he is just running through people. He's an amazing tight end.
Wicked fast.
Crazy fast. He starts getting quite a few offers from a lot of different colleges. One of them is Syracuse University. The head coach, what is his character, like the real guy's name?
The guy who, the character Dennis Quaid plays?
Yeah, so Dennis Quaid plays him. Ben Schwartzwalder.
Yeah.
And so he is reviewing tape basically in his office, and Clancy Brown, who plays his assistant coach, is feeding him reels of players. And he's like, wasn't there a kid from Elmira? He says, yeah. And he says, so you're like, why the fuck wouldn't we review this kid just because he's black? And they check tape. Of course, the movie's about him. Ernie Davis is fucking amazing. And so they go and check him out in person. He's also being recruited by Notre Dame, and he's trying to decide between these two schools. Immediately following this, there is a scene, a very important scene, where there's a press conference held with Jim Brown, who is a former Syracuse player who just got recruited by the Cleveland Browns. And it becomes readily apparent that he absolutely should have been the Heisman Trophy winner in, 1959? Mm-hmm. He absolutely should have been the Heisman Trophy winner that year. Like, set the running yards record, broke a whole bunch of other records, was the MVP of multiple games, just an outstanding player. And they're interviewing him, and they're like, you did all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Like, how do you feel? And he's like, I feel okay. Like, I feel like there's something missing. And the thing that's missing is, he didn't say it, but the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, the reporter lists off all of the things that he's won and all of the things that he's done. And he's like, there's one thing missing. And he's like, you're referring to the Heisman. I'm like, yeah, why shouldn't I refer to the Heisman? I'm the only...
No. He says, no, I'm not going to say that, because if I say that, then the headlines tomorrow are going to read, Angry Black Man Doesn't Know His Place. And his amazing quote following that is, I know my place, gentlemen. It just made me not where you like it. Mm. And that dude, that just like 1-2 punch to the gut. That was amazing. So immediately following this, at the recruiting session with Ernie, or at the recruiting session to recruit Ernie, the coach, played by Dennis Quaid, and Jim Brown go to talk to Ernie, and Dennis Quaid brings him basically because he's another black player on a team who just sort of made it through the entire program and is now going to the NFL. And he thinks that he can sort of level with Ernie about what it's going to be like at Syracuse. And they spend basically like a day together, and Ernie is just enthralled. He knows everything about this guy. He knows all of his stats. Very excited to be with him. And Jim Brown's trying to give him some advice, some understanding about what he's going to experience. There's a scene where he basically says, in many respects, you'll experience the exact same thing here that you will anywhere else, which is actually kind of heartbreaking. That in such a horrible circumstance, he's not even saying like, this is your safe haven, and like this really like
this is your ticket out.
Yeah, this is safe haven in like a real like shitty situation. He's like, no, in most ways it's going to be basically exactly the same as you've experienced before. But this coach is a very good coach, and he will make you better, and he will potentially prep you for the NFL. So
he also said, if you ever tell him that I said that, I will come down here all the way from Chicago and kick your ass.
Cleveland, yeah.
Yeah, Cleveland.
Yeah, he says, if you ever tell him I said that, I'll hop on the first plane back from Cleveland and wring your neck.
Yeah, and you can tell that, like, Jim Brown feels in some ways, not that he's manipulating, but he recognizes that he was only called to have this conversation because he's black. And while he, I think, appreciates the opportunity to inspire, someone else, a protege, if you will, he recognizes that there are other elements besides just inspiring a young upcoming athlete. And you can almost like see the calculus in his eyes that, he sort of decides that this is a bitter pill worth swallowing just to inspire the next generation.
And sort of on that inspiring thing, one thing that I would really like to point out about this movie is early in the movie, Ernie Davis and his grandfather, who he's got a very special relationship with, and his cousin are walking down the street, and they're walking in front of Sears and Roebuck, and they're watching one of the televisions that's in the window, and they see Jackie Robinson for the first time ever playing in the major leagues, and it is such an inspiration to them. They're like, there's literally a black man playing professional baseball
on TV,
and it really sort of set in their minds that this is possible. And the first thing that actually popped into my head was, I remember watching an interview with Whoopi Goldberg, and the first time that she saw Nichelle Nichols on Star Trek, she was a little girl, and
Uhura?
Yes, and she said that she ran into the kitchen to tell her mom. She was so excited. She's like, Mama, there's a black woman on TV, and she's not playing a maid or a housekeeper or anything. She's
An officer.
She's an officer. I mean, she's up there commanding respect. And actually, the true story of that I heard kind of recently with, because, Nichelle Nichols just recently passed. I was listening to an interview with her, and she was talking about how she actually, did not like it on set at first, and actually wanted to leave the show. And she was speaking with Gene Roddenberry, and he was like, please understand what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to inject diversity into a horribly skewed representation of the American populace. I'm trying to give young people who might identify with you a lot more than they might identify with another character on the show an opportunity to see somebody who looks like them, maybe talks like them, maybe acts like them, whatever. Trying to give them somebody that they can look up to, that somebody that inspires them. And she ended up having a conversation with Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
She said something to him like, I'm not you. I'm not out there marching. I'm not Rosa Parks. I'm not protesting. I'm not doing these things. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, you are doing just as much as we are. You're just doing something different. You are giving people somebody to respect and understand in a time where respect and understanding are, in short supply.
I remember there was a specific interview with Gates McFadden from Star Trek Next Generation. Gates McFadden played Will Wheaton's mother.
Okay.
But Gates McFadden was criticizing Gene Roddenberry in an interview because they were referencing Uhura. And they said it was revolutionary at the time to have a black woman playing an officer in a show about the future. And she responded with, yeah, a black officer in a show about the future, but she's still a black lady who answers the space telephone. And that's not enough. And I remember watching that and thinking to myself, wow, okay, yeah, they had representation, but she was still essentially reduced to a secretary. And while revolutionary at the time, a lot of people felt like Gene Roddenberry could have pushed the envelope a little further and done more with it.
Yeah.
I think it may be a bit of a myopic view to say he could have done more, in the sense that looking back with today's lens, if that was all she was cast as, you probably could have done more by today's standards. And I think this movie, The Express, really gets at that sort of hard line of if Gene Roddenberry pushed it too far, he wasn't the end all to be all of whether or not this show got greenlit.
Right.
And if some racist asshole above him shut the show down, now there's no Nichelle Nichols, now there's no Whoopi Goldberg.
Yep.
And I hate to fall into the camp of slow play your hand, but I just think of all of the amazingly healthy and pro-social messages that Star Trek delivered over the years. How many people it helped shape and understand and teach things like tolerance and empathy. And it's if none of that happened because Gene Roddenberry wanted her to be captain,
yeah,
what is the greater evil there?
Right.
It all depends on your perspective. I mean, you can appreciate, if you're sitting at ground level, are we appreciating how far we've come, or are we using how far we've come as a foundation for where we want to go? Both are entirely valid. I think it's entirely valid to say that Nichelle Nichols' role was revolutionary, should be celebrated. That's amazing. But it's equally as valid to say that's not where we stop.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I 100% agree.
But I think the problem that Jackson was outlining with, what was her name?
Gates McFadden.
Gates McFadden, I think, she was like retroactively applying it's not enough.
Yeah, I mean,
you need to proactively apply not enough and say like, yes, okay, we've reached that milestone. We've got, Ahura, but that's not enough. We need to push the envelope further. We need to incorporate more. It's not enough to have people look up to, a side character anymore. Not a side character, but a supporting cast anymore. We need a lead. We need a this. We need a that. Cover all your bases. It does you no good to turn around and say, the step we took wasn't big enough.
Right.
Turn back forward and make the bigger step.
Take the step that was already made and build on it.
Don't cut down previous progress, because it leaves you in a place where there's no place to go.
Right.
Basically. There's no step that you can take that in 30 years you can't look back and say, well, it could have been done differently, it could have been done bigger, it could have been done whatever. You can't do that.
If you're building
it'll serve you no purpose.
If you're building a staircase and you keep trying to perfect that first step instead of making the rest of them, you're going nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, that's what this movie's about. With the message of, I'm not trying to be the best in my category, I'm trying to be the best. More or less what we're talking about right here.
And at multiple points in the film, I feel like we can skip over a little bit of the plot because a lot of it is just in the context of a football game. We can move on to some of the bigger, finer points.
Well, yeah. So real quick, if I can,
yeah,
just start
absolutely.
I'm going to try and hit some rapid fire beats here. So basically, Ernie Davis decides to go to Syracuse. As you can imagine, it's extremely difficult. He meets with just horribly racist policies, both at the school, at local business, and on his football team with his fellow players. Even though that is the place where he probably meets the least amount of resistance and racism, it is still very present.
And I feel like I have to mention there are also other black players on this team, and it is one of the only teams that has more than one black player on the team.
Yeah. It is just at the beginning of the integration of college sports. So there are teams that are still, holdouts basically, that are not integrated at all. And so there is sort of a montage of both training and game sequences where initially Ernie Davis is not played. He then gets played and they obviously realizes immense talent, and he begins winning their games, and they end up with an undefeated season. Meanwhile, he develops a relationship with a young woman,
Sarah.
What else are we missing? What else did they do in the movie?
I mean, a lot is covered during that montage. And I don't know if this was a part of that montage or not, but like a part of that is, they're going to games, and the hotel that they're looking to stay at. Ernie and his fellow black teammates are not allowed entrance into that hotel. It's so powerful because this movie takes you from the teamwork and the camaraderie that you find in like a typical sports movie, and then
oh, but not these guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's yeah, you're totally right there. It's fucking hard to watch because you're like, it builds you up in the same way that like you said, like sports movies do, and you're like, fuck yeah, like yes, we're a team, we're gonna do it, we're gonna go all the way, we're gonna rah rah rah. By the way, we gotta stay in a hotel tonight, and 3 of your players can't come in.
Yeah,
and you're like, and it really, I love the shooting because of that, because it fucking, like, it takes the wind right out of your sails. Like, it uses the same mechanisms to pump you up and then pulls the wind right back out of your sails, because you are essentially experiencing a teeny tiny fraction, a teeny tiny bit,
a microcosm.
Oh yeah, of what those players felt in real life by being pumped up with their team and ready to sort of like, ready to run them and gun them and get them.
And then they get taken out at the knees because they're not allowed to walk in the building. Yeah,
it becomes readily apparent that, like, oh, by the way, we're still second-class citizens, and it's absurd.
So you've got this celebrated football team that's 9-0, undefeated season, staying at this hotel that is relatively adjacent to the football field where they will be training and playing, and it's not a rinky-dink place. I mean, it is a nice place. And right at the door, these players are stopped, and they're like, yeah, we don't allow colored folk.
Yeah,
and I say that it makes me cringe to say that, And then they tell them, hey, you've got to go in the back door and we'll have the staff direct you to your room. And they direct them basically to this broom closet with 3 cots.
Yeah, there was not a room. It was like a storage closet with a nasty smell that they converted into a sleeping quarters.
They very clearly hastily threw this together to make amends to this football team.
Not even amends. It was a hasty, half-assed solution.
Like,
to the
okay,
fact
well,
that,
here's where they can sleep if they're going to sleep.
Yeah, to the fact that our policy is that no black people are allowed in here. It was hard to watch. I can only imagine what it must have been to experience.
I can't imagine it because I've never experienced it.
So we're going through this movie kind of quick, and it makes sense in the sense that like it's a sports movie, and it's also a movie where I think the sort of the context drives it in many respects. So you kind of know where it's headed anyway, right? So there's a montage of games, practices, whatever, where Ernie Davis is sort of garnering attention. He's racking up the touchdowns and the foosballs. He's really scoring those alley-oops.
Love those little spinning guys.
Oh, if he hit a 3-pointer for every time that he bunted the ball, he checkmate. Checkmate.
Yeah, and so there's the sports side of it. There's an interesting scene where they're competing against, was it West Virginia?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's a heavy
That's
scene.
a hard one.
Ernie takes it all the way down to the end of the field there, but not quite a touchdown. And he gets pulled out of the game so that another player can make a touchdown. And the reason for this is the coach feels like the environment that they're in when they're playing West Virginia, the crowd that is present at this particular game, that they could run into real physical danger if Ernie is allowed to make the points in this game, really.
And Coach says something that I feel like he stands by in the sense that he's trying to protect his whole team and doesn't understand quite fully the ramifications towards his black players. And that is something akin to they have a different set of rules down here.
Mm-hmm.
And Ernie responds back to him with, I think their set of rules are the same set of rules as yours.
Yeah. Maybe, just maybe, Coach, that the rules down here are your rules too.
Yeah. And I think that made Coach...
That stopped him in his tracks.
Yeah, he had to take a hard look at himself and what he stands for and think about, am I censoring my team and my players to fit the stadium, or am I playing my team to their strength to win? Mm-hmm. Am I sacrificing a win to appease the masses, or am I letting my players be who they are for the sake of the game?
Yeah, because you're quite literally like...
You're taking your star player out of the game to not piss off the stadium.
And like to give you kind of like to contextualize this a little bit, literally before they like headed out to the field, he was saying, I want helmets on everybody all the time, even if you're not playing. And then he addressed the 3 black players, Ernie and
Art and Jack,
and said, you guys stay in the middle of the pack when we leave, like when we head from the locker room to the field, to kind of insulate them from, people were throwing bottles, people were, throwing more, everything.
Popcorn, food, beer bottles.
And so not only is sort of the general American sort of racist machine in full steam, they headed into like
dangerous territory.
Yeah, the sort of heart of racism in the North, a.k.a. West Virginia. I just lost West Virginia for us. You lost Alabama, I lost West Virginia. Who else? Who else are we taking aim at?
We lost the Germans.
Oh, we lost the Germans, yeah, for their goofer snooping.
Yeah.
So what happens next?
Well, we talked about the hotel. We covered kind of the montage of scenes. They play several scenes kind of throughout this movie. So the next big thing is they're invited to the Cotton Bowl.
They are invited to the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. And in the locker room, the coach basically says, if we go to the Orange Bowl, we are playing the 8th seed. If we go to the Cotton Bowl, we are playing the 2nd seed. We are playing Texas. We've never played before. And many people speculate that we are only number 1 because we haven't played them.
And in order to be the best,
you have to beat the best.
Yeah.
Which is a great line.
Oh.
Right? Yeah. Right up there with, can't win them all if you don't win the first.
Right.
Can't win a marathon unless you put some Band-Aids on your nipples.
I got nipples, Greg.
Can you milk me?
We're kind of slowly approaching kind of towards the end of the movie here. But one of the other plot points within this movie was Ernie's health. And you see, and they drop little scenes kind of throughout the movie. And you don't really know exactly where they're going with it. But he starts having these nosebleeds that are coming out. At one point, it's after a game, and he can kind of like shrug it off, like, well, he took a hit. There's another scene where he's with his girlfriend at the time, and his nose starts bleeding, and he makes a reference of, it's because I took a hit or something. I'm kind of
it's like another player. Like he said he sometimes after he takes a hard hit wakes up and there's blood in his pillow and he has no idea where it came from.
Yeah, and his girlfriend said, well, you didn't take a hit.
Yeah, you didn't take a hit recently, so...
Yeah. So that's another big part of this movie, and, arguably just as important as every other element.
So they end up going out to Texas. They go to Texas, and it turns out, believe it or not, just as racist as West Virginia in the 1960s.
There's a really poignant, 2 frames, right? But they're pulling in the bus to show up to Texas at the Cotton Bowl. The bus pulls up. The camera pans up, and you see the Civil War Southern flag hanging at the stadium right in front of the bus.
The Confederate flag?
The Confederate flag. You see the Confederate flag hanging right in front of the bus. And for me, that struck. The imagery was really strong because the first one to get off the bus is Ernie.
So they head into that Cotton Bowl, and like we do, probably in 3 beats, basically, Ernie basically kicks ass and takes names, scores a whole bunch for them. They're up by 15, but the other team is gunning for him.
And they know his weakness.
Yeah, the week before in practice, he strained his hamstring. And so they're basically hammering his hamstring. Every time they tackle him, they're punching on the back of his legs. And he scores a whole bunch of points. Halftime comes, and they're like, yeah, you shouldn't play anymore. We're up by a whole bunch. Team starts losing. Ernie comes back out and kicks a whole bunch more asses and takes a whole bunch more names, and they end up winning the Cotton Bowl. And then again with this really effective way to deliver to the audience member what the individual was probably just a tiny bit of what they were feeling. You just feel nothing but elation for them winning the biggest college honor. They won the national championships. Everything's amazing, and then right as they're celebrating, they get the news that, oh, by the way, the award ceremony is going to be held at this country club, and black people are not allowed at said country club. And so everybody's like, okay.
Well, our MVP is a black kid, so what are we going to do?
Yeah, the coach says, how do we feel about that?
Yeah.
At which point, Lundy, who has given Ernie flack for most of his football career at this point, comes up and he goes, well, I don't know about you boys, but I hear they have great barbecue down here.
There are a few things that I love more than a coming around redemption story.
Yeah.
I love the character who's such an asshole at the beginning, which is this character, and then by the end of it is the biggest defender of that person. I love that so much. It is so heartwarming to me.
It's a bit of a trope in a sports movie.
It is, but at the same time, I feel like people, it doesn't feel like it because we as people dig in like ticks, but people are actually capable of change. And it is something that can be done. I'm going to tell a story here. A close friend of mine who's far, far older than me, older than that could be my grandparent. He was born in 1927 in a very rural community in Michigan. You can imagine what his views were on race and integration growing up. And I remember him telling me he ended up going to university. He went to the University of Michigan, and he was in his dorm with a Jewish kid. This was just following the Second World War, so you can imagine how sensitive the Jewish kid was to racial and ethnic profiling and polarization of terms and stuff like that. And this friend of mine was going off about, integration in schools and was particularly upset about things, just as kids do, sort of running his mouth from this sort of garbled nonsense that he's heard in his youth. And his friend turned to him and said his name, which I'm not going to repeat, for his anonymity, and he said, "The people." And he said, it hit me like a sack of bricks. It never had occurred to me. Never occurred to me that they were people. 1 year from that day, he was on the steps of the Ann Arbor City Hall protesting for civil rights. People can change. I'm not saying it's a common occurrence. Sometimes it's a slow and incremental thing, but people can and do change. And I think that's the thing that I find so redeeming about that character arc is it always shows the beautiful adaptations and understandings that we're capable of if we just like give ourselves the opportunity. So they win the Cotton Bowl, and then
he's picked up for the NFL.
For the Cleveland Browns.
Yep. But then in very short order, it's discovered that his nosebleeds were actually
acute monocytic leukemia.
Yep. So he's still on the team, but he's on a bench. We get a quick scene where he's called out in one of the games he's going. So he still gets that satisfaction, but he doesn't get the linger on it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Ernie Davis died before he ever got to play his first NFL game. He died at 23 of leukemia
in 1963.
But not after, not before winning the Heisman.
For the first time, a person of color won the Heisman Trophy. And he broke that barrier and had a very, very large stroke of bad luck following that. And unfortunately died, but was such an amazing inspiration to people in that time and place. Heartbreaking story. But to be honest, one of the things I really liked about this movie was that it wasn't presented as a heartbreaking story. It really was presented more like a biopic, and it was like, we're not going to weigh in on whether or not this is heartbreaking, even though we know objectively it is. We're just going to tell the story and let the viewer feel the things that these characters felt in that time and place.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, I know all about Ernie Davis and Jim Brown, and having known the story before going into this movie, I had spoilers. I knew how it was going to end, but I wanted to see the journey. I wanted to be there because it's a rare glimpse into something that we don't get to see. I mean, it happened before I was born, long before I was born. So knowing who Ernie Davis is, knowing his story, knowing his background, it was very inspiring to see his story be portrayed, knowing that he played under the same number that Jim Brown did, at the same college that Jim Brown did, for the same team that Jim Brown did, because Jim Brown was his hero. And then inspiring players like Frank Little to play for Syracuse as well.
I think that was like the beauty too. Like I did a whole diatribe earlier about like Michelle Nichols and like, the inspiration of Jackie Robinson and like what they did for people. Like this movie, I think, is probably the single best example in cinema I can think of a situation where they literally show three generations. Like Ernie Davis would not have been able to do what he did without Jim Brown, and Frank Little would not have been able to do what he did without Ernie Davis.
Right,
like,
and
straight up.
And as a result, I mean, they kind of made the joke of Frank Little playing under Ernie Davis's number, but with Ernie Davis's passing, the Cleveland Browns retired his jersey, and Frank Little actually played under the number 44, which was Jim Brown's and Ernie Davis's college number. So it was Frank Little's, pardon the pun, little way of honoring those that came before him, those that blazed the trail for him to succeed. So to go off of what Colin was saying, Frank Little could not have done what he did without Ernie Davis picking up where Jim Brown left off.
Sorry, Floyd Little.
Floyd Little.
We've been saying
Little.
Frank Little. I knew there was something up.
Yeah,
Floyd
that's
Little.
my bad.
Floyd Little. Another thing that we didn't mention, and we will just briefly before, but Floyd Little was played by Chadwick Boseman, a very young Chadwick Boseman.
Unbelievable.
And
who also recently passed away.
Yes, from cancer at a very young age, which I think in some weird kind of way, I don't know how this is going to be interpreted. It's almost like it's very poignant, right? Like to have him as a small but very integral role in a movie about a young man absolutely just bursting to the seams with talent.
Passing away
at a
early
young
days
age
of his prime.
From cancer.
Yeah.
And then that exact same thing happening to him.
It's a heartbreaking poetry.
It's like a heartbreaking coincidence almost. Like I don't even know what to call it, but
the parallels are staggering, really.
Yeah, it's just Chadwick Boseman was so good. Another movie that I think is on our list that we're going to review is Thurgood, which details the early life of Thurgood Marshall, and Chadwick Boseman plays him. So I think that kind of puts a bow on it, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, Ernie Davis dies, and they sort of like do the black screen with text to sort of explain how a lot of the rest of the characters shored up. Floyd Little and Jim Brown both had fairly illustrious careers.
9 seasons each.
According to the text. And the coach, played by Dennis Quaid, had another 10 seasons and got inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like as they were wrapping it up, this was kind of typical sports movie fare. I thought that the deeper story at this point in time, and it left you feeling good. It left you feeling...
It left you feeling.
Well, the surviving characters had happy endings, more or less. The surviving.
They did. You're right. Yeah.
And it definitely left you on a high note after tearing your heart out.
Okay, so what do we like about this movie? Specifically.
I liked all of it. Not specific at all.
That is about as non-specific as you can make it.
I liked that this was the kind of movie that kept me involved. I didn't take too many notes during this movie because I was just genuinely interested in what was going on, and I didn't want to detach from it. It's not specific, but it's sort of just intangible to me. I just liked this movie.
Can we talk about, for a second, the fucking hits?
Oh my god.
Oh, sweet fucking Jesus.
My back hurt watching this.
This movie, there are a lot of great, well-filmed sports movies that sort of, like, deliver a hit, but I can't think of a movie that, films hits harder than this. And I'm saying hits as in tackles, like football tackles. Jesus, some of the filming, like, Jackson and I couldn't shut the fuck up about, like, yeah. Yeah, that was a hard one.
My neck and my back are just aching from watching these tackles. Like, at one point, Ernie gets tackled so hard he lands on his head and bends his neck forward. I'm just like, that's a concussion and spinal damage. Is
that a nod to the cinematography? I mean, because these are hits that take place in football all the time, but like the way that it was choreographed on screen really made you feel the impact more.
Yeah.
I mean, it was close up in slow-mo. Like, it was...
Well, and a nod to the Foley artist.
Yeah.
Jackson, is there anything that you liked or didn't like?
I feel like I'm copycatting Mark at this point, but I can't point at a single point of this movie, and I say this with the full knowledge that they did use racial slurs. I can't think of a part of this movie that I did not like. I mean, did I like the fact that they used the N-word as a blanket? No. But in historical context, in the context of this film, in the context of where...
You have to have it.
You have to.
You have to.
It whitewashes the movie if you don't.
Yeah, the omission of it would do a greater disservice to the movie. Sort of different angle. The cutting between... I don't honestly know if it was real footage or not. I know some of it was, but some of it I think it just may have been like a sort of filter trick. But the movie did this really cool sort of flitting back and forth between what looked like real football footage from like fucking 1961.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was real or not. I had that same thought.
The very end, I know the very last one was real. I'm confident in that. But they did it so much that I don't know exactly what scenes were real and what weren't. And I thought that was a fantastic effect.
Oh, it was beautiful. There was a specific effect that I greatly enjoyed in the Cotton Bowl. After Ernie takes his really hard hit, and he's at this point where he's not sure. He's limping. He's moving pretty slow for his speed, which is still faster than any other player on the field. And
you're gonna lose like 10% of your speed and still fucking slay everybody on the field.
But they did this really cool trick where he's looking at the ball and suddenly there's almost like a glitch on the screen and you see that classic heat mirage that you'd see coming up from like a hot pavement or, you know, a hot parking lot. Mm-hmm. You saw this heat mirage and the screen flickered for a second. And in my mind, that was trying to depict something is wrong with Ernie.
Well, yeah, so that's
Yeah.
exactly what it was trying to do, and that was one of those things where it's like, I actually would have put that in something that I didn't like about the movie, like, at first. So, like, when you first watch the movie, they're kind of doing this effect, and you're like, that's kind of dumb. That's kind of like, it doesn't fit with the movie. It doesn't feel right. It feels like they're trying to do something that's, like, a little bit more grandiose than this movie is supposed to be. It's supposed to be very real, very down to earth, a very real depiction of what happened. And you see this, like, sort of, this wiggly, I don't know, like heat mirage, like you said. And it's not until after the events of the Cotton Bowl that it gets revealed that Ernie has leukemia, and he's actually suffering from a lot of sort of the neurological effects of leukemia as well. And it's amazing how your mind changes, and you're like, oh, actually those effects are really fucking cool, and they're actually a really good idea to sort of subtly hint at the audience member that Ernie was going through something that even he himself didn't necessarily perceive, but it was happening. And I thought that was so cool that they threw that in before the audience even knew.
Yeah.
But when you first encounter it, you're like, I'm not sure about
Well,
this. But then you realize what it is, and you're like, oh, I got it. Okay, this is cool.
I will say, they could have been more obtuse with it. They could have shown it and then swiftly clipped to Ernie making, like shaking his head or trying to shake it off or something like that. But
I think that would have been less obtuse.
Fair, yeah. More obvious, I guess.
More obvious, yeah. Okay.
But in my opinion, that would take away from the integrity of it because, again, this was invisible. Ernie had no idea what was wrong with him. He just knew something wasn't right.
Right,
so
exactly.
It wouldn't have made sense to clip to Ernie's trying to shake it off. Ernie recognizes something's wrong. Like, he just took a really hard tackle. For all he knows, he has a concussion, and that's the end of it.
Well, and that is the beautiful thing, because he's the protagonist, right? He's carrying us through the story, and if he doesn't know what's going on,
we shouldn't either.
We shouldn't either, especially in a movie that is supposed to be as tight to the protagonist as a biopic is to be.
Yeah. So all that to say, I had nothing to dislike about this movie.
So you're pushing us into dislikes.
Yeah.
I agree with that. So nothing with you?
Nope.
I didn't have anything that really struck me. The main character's acting, I think could have, like...
Yeah,
I think he was cast well as like from a sort of physical standpoint. Like
it grew on me.
But again, the other thing too is, like, with a biopic, you don't know how much somebody is actually embodying the person that they're supposed to be sort of impersonating. So I can't say it was his acting necessarily, but he had a very, like, a subdued kind of droll delivery. But maybe that's the way Ernie Davis was, and he knew that, and we don't as viewers. But I think the other thing is, like, sometimes when I would say this, like, perhaps with, like, Harry Potter as well, even though I really like Daniel Radcliffe from what I understand as a person, I'd give Daniel Radcliffe's acting like maybe like a 7 out of 10. I'd give everybody else like a 9.5 out of 10. It's like, I feel like this kind of similar in that, like, I'd give the main character in this, the main actor in this, maybe like a 7 out of 10. But everybody else was a 9.5, so, like, it's a bit apparent, in some respects.
Yeah, and like I said, he definitely kind of grew on me as I kind of further associated the character and the actor. For me, the two characters that held the most weight, the two actors, his grandfather and Dennis Quaid's character.
Yes. Yes.
They, for me, were the pillars that the movie's art was built on.
Okay, so nothing else that we didn't like. Did anybody have any quotes that we didn't throw out yet?
I had a couple. So early on in the movie, you see young Ernie has a stutter. It goes away as he gains confidence, and he is watching, like you said, Jackie Robinson and Jim Brown, and as he gains confidence, he's watching his idols perform in front of the world and realizes that he has a skill and he can do that too, and the stutter falls away. I found that really impressive. But he and his grandfather are reading scripture, and he's struggling to get through the words. So he says to his grandfather, the words, I know they're in there, but they don't come out straight all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that because it showed, it's like, listen, I'm not stupid. I know what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
I'm just struggling to say it.
Yeah.
And
It's in my brain.
yeah,
It's a matter of getting it out my mouth. It's the tough part.
yeah. And
I had forgotten that he had a stutter earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
'Cause they don't go back and
they don't revisit it.
Which also, like, in many respects, may be a powerful thing for a person with a stutter to watch this and say, like, Ernie Davis struggled with a stutter, and then, like, look at him now. He's up there, giving a speech to a room full of reporters.
I personally had a horrible stutter when I was a kid. I still stutter,
Mhm.
but I learned to work past it. I still struggle with speech on occasion. I have to take long pauses, but to see a young child with a stutter overcome a stutter because of a newfound confidence, because he was inspired by somebody, that's impressive, and that means a lot to certain people. The other quote that I have is when they're approaching the Cotton Bowl, Dennis Quaid, Coach Schwartzwalder,
Coach.
says to the team, "I want you to take a good long look at this, because in Texas, football is a religion."
Yeah, that's good.
That was funny.
That was good. I got a couple here. So after Ernie gets done talking to Jim Brown about whether or not he wants to join the team at Syracuse, he ends up talking to the coach, and coach says, "Oh, so you're talking to Jim," and he has a good quasi-paternal relationship with Jim, but also Jim has a very strong personality and, is obviously not totally in love with his experience at Syracuse and playing college ball, understandably. And so he says to Ernie to try and, basically do any damage control. He says, take what Jim says with a grain of salt. And Ernie says, "And what if he said that you were a good coach?" And Dennis Quaid says, "Then what I'd say is, too much salt is bad for you." Which I thought was kind of a clever line. And then I've got one more. When they were reviewing tape on Ernie, when they're in the projection room before they even approach him, at the end of it, Dennis Quaid says to Clancy Brown, he says, "Has he got any offers?" Clancy Brown says, "Yeah, only about 50.
Yeah. So I had one quote. This was kind of in the earlier portion of the movie. Dennis Quaid's character notices that some girls on the field were waving at him, and the coach recognizes that time and place, that certain people would feel certain ways about certain people associating with other certain people.
Which is almost verbatim what he says.
Yeah.
And he makes the comment to Ernie, "If you're a smart kid, Davis, I don't have to spell it out for you, do I?" And even though that's such a painful quote, or it acknowledges a painful truth in that time and place, this movie was all about not so subtle barriers being broken down or being pushed past, or just acknowledging that there were certain struggles that certain people had to go through. That it's just very powerful.
Well, and I think what's important about that scene and that interaction is it ties so beautifully into a later quote that we gave that in many respects was the foundation of this movie, which was just maybe, coach, that the rules down here are your rules too. And that was just it. It's like, basically by saying that, I can't even look at white women, I can't date white women, I have to stay 50 yards away at all time, blah, blah, blah. What you're saying is that you are complicit in the, racist structures that are being imposed on me by the rest of the society. You're complicit in those.
That actually brings up another quote that I did write down and I forgot to mention. Ernie's friend on the football team is sort of taking him under his wing and like guiding him through Syracuse, right? So immediately after the conversation that Ernie has with Coach about, "I don't have to spell it out for you, do I?" They're talking about it, and he goes, "Yeah, we call that the white girl speech." And Ernie goes, "That's funny. I don't recall seeing that in the brochure."
Yeah, no, it's an important scene for the development of the character of the coach. In the same way that there's that other character that came to develop himself and to develop his views to a more empathetic and tolerant position. The coach does that as well. And he does it in a much more subtle sense. Not subtle in that it's not called out, it is, but subtle in that you're not asking this guy to not use like racially charged language. You're not asking him to not berate somebody who's black and not berate somebody who's white on the football field. You're simply asking him to not be complicit in racist mores, basically, like racist tradition in the United States. You're basically just asking him, like, just don't feed into this. And his character does evolve in that way, but couldn't have evolved if they didn't triangulate the character's position in this scene and in the future scene in West Virginia.
They didn't establish a baseline to evolve from.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I think is that what we get on quotes? We learn with quotes. So we did get an email. Woo! We did get an email. Grandpa Jack emailed us and pointed out that we actually left out a kind of critical scene.
Critical.
Operative
word.
Honestly, you won't understand the movie Enemy of the Gates if you don't see the fart candle scene.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful scene, a beautiful scene. You know, this is going back to Enemy of the Gates, where the soldiers they're in the barracks and everyone's just having a grand old time. Music's playing, and
they're dancing and celebrating life.
Yeah. And in the background, you see this fine gentleman of a soldier extinguish a candle with an unusual instrument that one doesn't typically put a candle out with.
I would say that it's on the same vein as like a trombone or a trumpet.
We call it the bow trumpet.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
The stern trumpet.
The stern trumpet.
The stern trumpet.
Yeah, fella farted out a candle. And that happened.
And we forgot to describe that in Enemy at the Gates. And
Grandpa Jack called us out on it.
Grandpa Jack reached out to us and helped us understand that was a critical scene that we needed to describe. And Grandpa Jack, I hope we did you justice with our description of the fart candle scene.
Let us know if we can do better.
Yeah, if you need more description than that on the fart candles,
you know how to reach us.
We honestly, we even dug into the literature, and I honestly wish I was joking that we dug into the literature on this, but we actually dug up a paper on...
It was a peer-reviewed article.
Flatulence. I think it was proceedings from a conference.
It's possible.
I think it was proceedings from a conference on digital gaming. And
the article was titled Frontlines and Flatulence.
Yes, and it was basically a write-up on anecdotal accounts of Finnish fart games during World War II, which I have to imagine they're going to be comparable to Russian fart games during World War II. Right?
I would imagine so.
Yeah, like they can't be too far off.
Farts are universal.
Everybody likes farts. Not as much as Grandpa Jack likes farts, but everybody loves farts.
I mean, if you're calling us out, like, you've got a certain affinity.
Yeah.
For the flatulence.
All right, Grandpa Jack. I hope we got you there.
Appreciate you, Grandpa Jack.
Are we ready to conclude? Maybe rate this up.
We're gonna bake this potato. All right. I'll lead us off. I will give this 8.0 Heisman.
All right.
Damn.
Nailed it. See this? That's why I lead us off. Because, yep.
See, I see your 8.0 Heismans and raise you 8.1 MVPs.
If Mark doesn't go 8.2, I don't know what I'm going to do.
I'm going 7.9
We go the other direction.
Footballs, I guess. I was going to go Heisman, so thank you very much, Ron.
Foosballs.
Leatherbacks.
I don't want my Bobby playing foosball with them gargantuan.
Bobby Musa.
Did they ever catch that gorilla would escape from the zoo and punched you in the eye? No, mama. The search continues. That was actually voted one of the greatest sports movies of all time, and it was actually rated the #1 sports comedy in history.
Really?
Yeah.
Above Caddyshack.
Yeah. Which, I gotta admit, head-to-head, I would take The Waterboy over Caddyshack.
Yeah?
I would. I think it's funnier.
I agree.
I love it.
I've never seen Caddyshack. I haven't.
Now,
so your preference is The Waterboy?
Yeah.
Now here's a different question. Happy Gilmore or Waterboy? Both Caddyshack and Happy Gilmore are golf movies.
So I do love both of those movies. If you had asked me 20 years ago, I think I would have said Happy Gilmore. But to be honest, nowadays, I think I would say The Waterboy. I think objectively, I think that is a slightly better made film.
All right.
But I love Happy Gilmore as well.
I lean towards Happy Gilmore.
I think most people would be in your camp. And you know, it could be. I may have overwatched Happy Gilmore.
That's entirely possible.
may
The
have
other
overwatched
thing
it.
is, a lot of people in our generation have more exposure to Happy Gilmore. It is a newer film compared to Waterboy.
Is it?
Yeah.
Waterboy came out later.
Now, I'm pretty sure Waterboy came out first.
I don't know.
Doesn't really matter, but
I
can look it up later.
Yeah, we'll look it up. I feel like Waterboy came out later, but all right. So is that all we got?
That's all I got.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got.
That is all for the Old Crep review. Thank you for listening. If you have any ideas for movie reviews, please email us at 3, that is the number 3, menandabasement@gmail.com. We didn't have any band names.
No, we didn't.
Oh my god. Well, I guess another tour of Chugga Chugga Burr Burr and Booger Mortis.
Yep.
Oh, Booger Mortis, dude. They were freaking killing it the other day.
Oh my god.
It's going to be hard to top that.
You know what? I think I'm just going to throw one out here retroactively. So in a scene where Ernie Davis and the 2 other black teammates walk into the basement room of that hotel, I'm going to say Room Smell.
Room Smell.
I feel like Room Smell is absolutely an indie band name. Like Neutral Milk Hotel and Room Smell. They tour together. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
The Smell was a British punk band in the 60s. So Room Smell, not too far off base for
Nope.
60.
The Smell was a big inspiration for Room Smell.
Yeah.
And Pit Smell, which is a particular, that's like the punk version of Room Smell. They're big now.
Yeah. Nose.
Nope. Just nose? That's
Nose.
it? Nose.
Yeah.
Got it. Nose goes, not nose goes.
Exactly.
Yes. You can also find us on iTunes and Google Play or wherever you find your podcast. And until then, I am Kyle McLeod.
Mark off here.
Action Jackson.
And we'll see you in cyberspace. I did it again.